So far, I'm likely to believe that what I've already done is still the same, the N1 and R1. And then I'm likely thinking this is R2, and this is the trophy, right? So these constitute 3 pools of prompts. I like to believe that these pool prompts are going to look substantially different from these. So like they don't equal each other. It's not, Lotus. I know, it's not. And also, by the way, it also differs slightly between these sections as well. And I don't know if it's because they changed all of them or they didn't. In section 1, what I'm describing is absolutely true. But because section 2, you have more stuff, there's some overlap between pool 1 and pool 2. In section 3, no, I get that. I get that. But that, it's not, okay, Lotus. It's not what pool is assigned to each one. It's how many pools there are in the selection. So like, I don't think there's more than 2 or 3. So regardless is what I'm saying. It also doesn't choose between the thing. I don't think there's more than 3. If you're making an argument that there's more than 3, then sure, I agree. Like if you think there's more than 3, then that's fair actually, because I don't know what it is like in section 4, but in section 2 it almost feels like there were less because I had repeats. So what I mean by that is there are times where if it hits the same pool, I clearly know that I already know the answers. And that's kind of unfortunate. The only problem here with my thought is I don't know if section 3 already had more things, right? If they already had many unique pools, right? If they had many unique pools already, right? Because you have more vocabulary and stuff. And then this just naturally had less pools. And then when it was in section 1, it was like the same the whole time. Like it felt like it's the same because it's limited. You know what I mean? Right? So maybe they were scaling up. But the problem is I can't know that. It's too difficult. And you're in a later section too. So I have no idea how many. You might actually know. You might actually argue there might be like 4 or 5. Right? And then in the kanji section, right? In the in the character section, you know exactly how many pools there are. There's only one pool for each interaction, each intersection. The one writing prompt for each of the new ones, all the recurring kanji only has one pool for them. So even though the choices, right, like the choices in the prompts could be shuffled. They could be shuffled. Like I don't know, a day and ni could be shuffled, or like the pairs could be shuffled, but inherently they are pulling in the same prompt order. So they're not exactly identical. I'm actually kind of curious in the future if this changes. In section 2, I actually think there might be less. It might be actually 2 pools. But that's what I mean. Just to clarify, like different pools. There might be more as you're going. Like they might have already designed that, and I have no idea. It would be great if I knew everything before changes. So it's also hard to know now what I say about section 1. I have no idea if what I say about section 1 and section 2 are accurate anymore. If you know what I mean. So it would be kind of cool, in my opinion, to speedrun. Fictitious was joking, but it would be kind of cool to speedrun it over again and see how the structure has changed, like the other stuff. Oh, and I also did that before, by the way. You made a great point. So like here's a great example. Here's a great example, and I'll probably tell you, like, you probably already guessed all of this, Lotus, by what you just said. You can get questions from different pools by exiting out of the lesson. For example, you know, scores, right? Lots of people score, so this is a game after all. So how do you mechanically score a lot? Well, you exit and enter. Like for example, the kanji, right? The kanji is separated even more in Japanese, the kanji. So this, you can pick a prompt, which this chapter is a good example, the hito prompt. The pool only consists of two possible groups. This right here, associating Jiugatsu with Do, right? So you have a 50-50 swing. It might even be weighted, by the way. 50-50 swing. So when you exit, you can land on Hito. And then you do Hito. Hito.
Hito.
Hito.
Hito.
Hito.
Hito.
You can complete this 5 times faster than the other prompt. But you know what the pools are. There are only 2 groups set. Yeah, I know. I knew you were getting to that, Ink Wolf, because you've already paid attention to the structure. So things like that, and then it links to what Lotus is saying. There are only 2 possible choices, and this system actually works for the unit structure. The hard thing to determine is how many pools there are per se. And my estimates are there are only enough pools for each occurrence of repetition. So since there are 2 repetitions, right, 2 R1 and R2, they likely at least try to get 2 pools of knowledge. In my opinion, from a design standpoint, if they add a 3rd repetition, you would likely say, oh yeah, but let's increase the number of pools, because you don't want it to become samey too much. That's the idea. However, it doesn't mean you can't land on the same pool multiple times. And the way I estimated pools is because of doing the lessons as they go, as opposed to going back and clicking on it, right? Clicking on the lesson and then refreshing, clicking on the lesson and refreshing to see what the exact number of pools are. And also, I don't know how they number generate the possibility of which ones they're going to bring up, but in kanji section, it's literally unique to everything. So you can predictably know how many pools there are. And that's kind of why it's so kind of obvious. And if you're gaming the game, so if you're playing Duolingo like a game, these are the things that will show up so regularly to people who play video games. And inherently, in my opinion, personally, you become complacent, like all the stuff that I discussed before. You become complacent and you end up learning less. So it becomes, like most people criticize Duolingo, people are really good at patterns. They are so good at patterns. Duolingo does something that's really, really well, but the problem here that Duolingo is facing is that their audience are really good at looking at patterns. So if you give them a goal, they'll stray away from the other, like, objectives of Duolingo, which is to get someone to learn something. Well, they did learn something, just happens to be not the thing that they went out of their vision to learn. So they've been trying all these different other methods, but think about how much content they have to generate. So I think over time, the pools are increasing. I'd like to think in the future, as time goes on, it's kind of like any other live service model. Like, for example, when you're playing PUBG or Call, Warzone, eventually there will be so many maps, as in pools, that maybe you won't get redundant and you can't like game the system and whatnot. But generally speaking, yeah, the dark side of emergent gameplay, basically. I wish the kanji practice where you primarily write the kanji involved more than one kanji at a time. Yeah, repetition is important, but without variety, yeah, there's no challenge. Yeah, so if you're taking the perspective of novelty, I talked about this, yes, like the last 2 days when someone asked me, if you wrote something 1,000 times, would you recognize it more? Well, it's a bell curve. Repetition and novelty comes at an intersection on a bell curve. When it's too repetitious, you become complacent and you don't learn anymore. When it's novelty, in the early novelty phase, you'll learn inherently because it's new. However, at an intersection, that's usually what happens, in my opinion, obviously. And the way I use to retain this information is, instead of having Duolingo do this, I am doing this manually myself. So I'm trying to bring in outside information in order to engage myself, as opposed to, you can go into almost all these lessons and ace them, but when it comes to recalling, it's you're very slow. I'm about to get there, basically. For me, I go very slow, but I recall most of it. Because novelty and engagement slows you down. If you ace them and you continue to ace them at your own pace, this is relative. We're not comparing apples and oranges between two people. If your normal pace speeds up and you become more efficient, that doesn't necessarily mean your recall is going to be faster. At some point of repetition, without the dynamics of like engagement, or if you don't self-impose engagement, since the tool doesn't, you still reach a level of complacency. You're bootstrapping through the thing. And that was a big concern for me in Duolingo's design, but that's what makes it consistent. When you do something consistently, it's consistent. Personally, when I have a 2x multiplier, I speed through, but otherwise I write each and every question in Japanese in a notebook, and I find it when I learn best by far. Yeah. So for me, I do all the lesson sets as slowly as possible with as many forms of introduction of engagement. Well, actually, for me, every 25 days or so, I swap up the way I take in the input in Duolingo. And at the end of every lesson, the 2x multiplier comes up. At the every end of 2 lessons, I actually bootstrap through kanji and hope that I land on the writing section of each. So I go to the kanji section. I gotcha. It's a personal game of mine that I do. When I hit the 2x at every lesson set, I gotcha for the writing section. So I hit this practice button until I gotcha for the writing section. And then I move backwards. And then move backwards. And continue to move backwards going up. If I get lucky, I'll get through all my kanji writing section at least 1 repetition, right? While being bootstrapped in the intellectual overlap between the already used kanji, like the multiplying kanji. And then I start over the next day. I continue doing that. Start over the next day. So if they manage to give me 3 sections, there's a chance I can get back all the way to the beginning. If not, the ones in the beginning are the ones that I are most efficient at remembering, because I have the most practice. As the list gets longer and longer, the ones earlier and earlier will end up being normalized to the frequency of the newer ones. So the newer ones will always be prioritized in bootstrapping in terms of writing. So that's my current structure for knowing the kanji. And so far, I think all the reviews, I've written every single kanji in the order that they occurred, with a few exceptions, right? So that's how I bootstrap with 2x, just making the gamified thing, that the small pools and the repetition, to my advantage, because during that time, I'm doing most of this, right? So to break the tedium to break the tedium, or potentially that I will naturally become complacent by sticking to these things. At the end of each lesson, it's a different form of engagement. So much like the way games are introduced, right? They are structured in a manner that you go back and forth between different types of inputs, right? And then during these lessons, I use different forms of input that isn't supplied by Duolingo. So I talk about other things or make other comments. The idea is over time, every 25 days is where I say my competency over time drops because of tedium. So what happens is every 25 days, I add a new form of input that I am voluntarily doing and not Duolingo. Maybe they'll introduce something else in the future that engages me, so that will be added to the thing. The idea is that I put a hard stop, a soft cap on 25 days. I must do something new. Or I must add something. Or I change something and then come back to it. So far, I haven't done something that slowed me down so much that I need to discard something or pick something, and then I would rotate, kind of like a fitness program. I would rotate my circuits, right? Rotate circuits. The next 25 days, I might not do certain things anymore if it's too oversaturated because of interest of time. Then go back to it the next 25 days, etc. And that's kind of how I do physical activity, write papers, talk to people, play video games. Pretty much all my life cycle tends to the balance between novelty and complacency. Life is colorful until it's not. If you do something so efficiently, you're doing the same thing over and over again. So the idea is at some point I'm not saying yours is 25 days or what you should do. I can't provide that answer. But the idea is start with awareness. Start with the awareness of establishing when you become complacent. For your goals, whatever your goals are. For me, my goals are stay engaged. That's it. Like it's not being fluent in Japanese. Sorry, folks, but it's not fluent in Japanese. Japanese just happens to be the bonus thing that I'm doing right now. My goal is to communicate and show that I'm constantly engaged, and I'm always trying to do something more than hey guys, I'm here. This is day 84. I'm going to grind the same thing I've done in the last 83 days. Enjoy. And then, the person stops talking. Eventually, they stop having internal monologues. They start worrying about numbers. And then they start crunching for efficiency. And that's kind of my spiel right now, going into 84. And I love live service models because even if you are lazy, as in like, even if someone doesn't like to come up with their own ideas or make things fun for them and stuff, live service tends to change, right? Because they're a live service. So cue the MMORPG cycle, right? Cue the freemium cycle. Whatever it is, there will be a potential change that can reinvigorate. Lots of people leave a live service game, wait for the update, then come back to a live service game, and they're immediately caught up. Then they go on and juggle other live service stuff. So these are the things that I feel Duolingo is in a great position to leverage. However, I think the people at Duo wasn't ready for the emergent gamer population. Like what I mean is they underestimate in a way, but maybe not foreseen because it's emergent, right? That a bigger critical mass is required to offset efficiency. Like even people who they're not even aware of this stuff, like, oh, I'm tracking my pool, oh, this seems the same and stuff, they can intuit this stuff. Like kids are crazy. Like that's what I mean by when someone says, I'm not learning anything with Duolingo, I'm not learning anything with Duolingo, and I'm like, well, what were you trying to learn? And they say something like Japanese, and I wanted to become fluent, right? But then they describe why. I asked, why aren't they learning? And they described basically learning. Well, but what I mean by that is they learned something that didn't really help them with recalling, but they were so good at doing the other things that they learned, as in like gaming patterns and how to like snore, like basically not even look at it's I describe it with my Neverwinter thing. It became a habit that it's like drinking coffee, it's like drinking water. That's what Duo does so well. It makes it feel like it's habit. It's like effortless, right? The problem with that is, yo, these kids, I imagine they can do the lessons like without even looking anymore. Just go through and do a tap cycle. Like if you have super, you don't have hearts, right? You don't have hearts, do a tap cycle, and then they get their dopamine. Their feedback, XP go up. It's great. And I honestly think that is what Duo has to fight. It's crazy how well talented people can not even be aware that they're becoming complacent, and they can still go through all the lessons, see all the points, but rarely ever be aware that their engagement has actually like tanked completely. And the difference here is when it's novel, you are engaged for information. When it becomes complacent, you are engaging for dopamine. And what I mean by that is you are engaging for comfort. So yes, you still get, this is not a progress chart. This is a intake, like an input chart, right? But your progress and your efficiency is gonna continue to climb, like until a specific plateau, like here. And then when you reach that plateau, the feeling you get is my speed hasn't changed. My speed hasn't changed at all anymore. I'm getting diminished returns. And then at the same time, it's combined with a low input comprehension. So not only does it feel like your speed didn't change significantly, you also took in less. There's lower comprehension over time. And this is a recipe for disaster right here, in my opinion. It makes people feel really bad. And I think Duo has a tough battle against itself. Like this is what Duo stage in their development cycle is facing. Combating the super talented ability, in my opinion, of most humans to become almost unawarely efficient, and at the same time their consternation with being very efficient. I'm just curious why. So you are working so hard every day, you deserve more viewers. Thanks Platinum. I'm just curious why. How you get motivated doing it for so long? What I'm saying here, Platinum, what I'm saying here, I stay motivated because I'm constantly, there's something new every day. Like this, I just spent what, almost an hour now, or like I spent like 30 to 40 minutes talking about this. It's incredibly fascinating, in my opinion. It's incredible. Your girlfriend is learning French in your girlfriend is learning French in Duo, and there's no kanji practice equivalent there, and she wonders how I get XP so fast. Yeah, yeah. There's also something in Spanish. I was curious too. I actually spectated. So a lot of people, who, you know, followed me, and I have leaderboards and stuff. There's something in the Spanish course as well. Both from English to Spanish and Spanish to English. That is incredibly efficient. So yeah, I don't talk about the gamification stuff too much, but I look at patterns too. Right, I am a gamer as well. Gaming and in general has learning properties. So if I was farming XP, my stream will look very different. If the goal is, if someone challenged me, it's like, oh, how do you optimize and learn for XP? I could do that too, in my opinion. However, for me, my bonus focus here is to learn Japanese. So most of my time spent slowing down and stuff is to integrate and improve recall in Japanese, using Duolingo as a platform, while all the other things I bring in better achieves that goal. So lots of times, the reason why I do these things, someone actually asked me, I had a video comment recently, that's why I'm late today by 2 hours. Someone actually asked me, and I loved it. They asked me what my objective is. You might be thinking like, people on stream ask you this all the time. It's like, but this is a video comment, right? I already talked about like 90% of my video comments is someone assuming everything because I happen to post something with Duolingo in the background, right? Right, but this person asked me, and all the stuff that I'm talking about, that's why. Like, Japanese learning, awesome. I'll do it, but not do it in the sense that I want to learn Japanese. I do it because learning is interesting. Give me paint, and I will try to make watching paint dry. Like, I will tell you how it's interesting. I'll make paint drying watching interesting. That is the idea behind this. It's not because Anki Denshu offers more things to the person. My objective when I'm trying to explain, like, I was trying to answer the person's question without writing a essay, and I ended up writing an essay. I'm sorry, stranger. I tried to warn them. I gave them a short answer and a long answer, but I ended up writing an essay after 3 hours. But the idea is the tool inspires the person. However, it's the person that decides how well the tool works, in my opinion. Right? So if you become too dependent on the tool to be inspired or to offer things, in my opinion, you stop creating. You stop creating things. Right? So I love that Lotus is here. Indie is here. Platinum. Right? And Ink. Welcome. And talking about these things. That's what makes me learn Japanese. But I'm not really focused on learning Japanese. It could be anything. And usually I chose video games because video games, there's a lot of video games. Right? A lot of video games. And that's kind of what I wanted to tell the person. They asked me what's my objective. Internet hustle culture. I'll give a really short summary. Internet hustle culture frightens me. Why does it frighten me? It makes everyone think, or unconsciously, or I mean like subconsciously or consciously think that things happen fast or need to happen fast, and it tells you what to focus on. It prescribes what's important to the person. So what happens is people go around and have a hypothesis-driven life. In science, this is an exercise in futility. When you go and design an experiment, you go design an experiment looking for a specific outcome. And I phrase it this way because I like talking about in scientific terms. But what does this look like? It's the word expectations. Most people use the word expectations. So you expect to become competent in Japanese. Therefore, you encounter the internet hustle culture with all the strategies to make yourself competent in Japanese. You follow those things and you continue to believe in those things. As opposed to null hypothesis testing, where you take the hypothesis, so you test it, and then look at everything else that's going on, and then look at what your hypothesis is. So what does my Duolingo take looks like? I do a lot of things Duolingo don't do, because Duolingo, apparently, after watching a lot of ads, promises certain things, right? Is that true? Well, I don't know. Let's find out. Some things are true. Meanwhile, I stay cognizant of observing the things it lacks. What can I do about the things it lacks? Well, I'm a thinking person. So I will continue to observe Duolingo while improving upon its methods. Right? This is actually the scientific method, not the hypothesis-driven stuff that you, unfortunately, formal education kind of teaches. It's kind of like Duolingo if you're talking about bad habits or establishing bad habits. The whole idea of hypothesis-driven testing and approaches, that's the Occam's razor approach. And oftentimes when you're trying to ascertain what works and what doesn't work and create a self-awareness, it's usually not this simple. Right? Oh, right. This guy is an expert. So if I follow this guy and do whatever they say, it will work for me without outside input to observing if it does work in the moment, right? If you're looking at the goal, you're not looking at the process. You aren't looking at the process, right? Much like my advice here, that's not advice. I'm not telling you what to do because I can't agree with things like this. You take all the inspiration you can, do it, and keep reevaluating if it's working or not, right? If the promises are accurate by looking at the null, right? By looking at the null. 99% is null, 1% is accurate. As in, in hindsight, it is very difficult to expect that you go out to do something and that's exactly what you get back. Especially on things that are so complex, like learning. I get that it's easier to think of it this way, where if you eat something, eventually you'll become full, right? That is fine. That type of logic is personally fantastic. Like, you're hungry, go eat something, and then eat until you're full. Certainly. However, when you're doing something as complex as this, the internet hustle culture, this is how I tried to answer that person's question. The hustle is that they're selling you an outcome and you believe in that outcome. So as long as you follow that, whether you think you're doing it or not, you're expecting that. I went out of my way to use Duolingo and observe Duolingo and observe myself using Duolingo. No one has asked me in a video comment what my objective is. Well, I might find out that I learned some Japanese. I don't know yet. Actually, 2 people previously challenged the notion that if I even learn Japanese, right? Well, I have some statistics and some stats that would say at least I learned something about Japanese. That's not my expectation. My expectation is to see if Duo does what it does, but by challenging it and finding out what all the things it doesn't do as well, right? So it's ironic that I get attacked for being a shill for Duo when, in order for me to ascertain what Duo does, you actually challenge what it doesn't. That's science. It's null hypothesis testing. If someone is selling you snake oil, you gotta at least partake and see if it is in fact snake oil. Right. What does PhD mean in channel name? I have a PhD. Platinum. PhD is a doctoral degree in the United States. I'm not sure in India what they refer to PhDs, but I went to graduate school, or like a like it's, if you go through high school, right, or whatever your mandatory schooling is. I don't know how it works in India. I didn't really talk to my coworkers about how they got their PhDs, but after you graduate from high school, you know, the one that everyone has to do in each country, whichever the system is, there's like often 2 levels above that, and PhD, that's what that is. It means that I've had education somewhere of that level. Yahoo! Hey, hello there, Resonante. Hello again. Yeah, so that's what I'm talking about. So maybe that's not relevant or anything, but these are my ruminations. I'm not an expert in learning. I'm not an expert in psychology. I have to keep emphasizing that, right? I'm an observer. What I observe, I do the best of my ability to navigate expectations. And these are my anecdotal experiences that are meant to be a point of inspiration. So I don't know if I'll ever be persuaded, perhaps, to try to come up with some sort of like logical progress. I mean, there are other people online that does this all the time, where they give you like a web of decision making, right? That looks something like this, right? In fact, I know a prominent person who's in the mental health thing that a lot of people resonate with. They would create webs like this, like webs, and then all these decision making places are supposed to help inform flags for people's self-awareness, and then that type of awareness can be transcribed to not just your personal health, but to like skill acquisition. I've seen this done before. To me, I can't do any of this. It takes like hundreds of people's a collective work together. I don't have that much influence, and I don't really want to be doing that with my life. So for me, I'm basically demonstrating these steps on a case-by-case basis, and that's how you make your web of it. How has the hustling gone? The hustling, you say? It's been going pretty well, I suppose. I'm not my hustle, my clickbait is going pretty well. I've met a lot of great people. Yeah, my hustle. Okay, I'll admit to something, right? My hustle is that I use Duolingo. So here's my hustle, right? My hustle is I use Duolingo. And Duolingo offers a social and psychological challenge for me. So how do I stay motivated learning, I guess learning Japanese using Duolingo? It's because every single day there's a chance that I'm going to be socially, psychologically challenged by using it. So my hustle here is there's a lot of reasons why I'm using Duolingo. And it's also because it's ascribed to Duolingo's position. It is popular. It is controversial. Inherently controversial. And it is accessible. Which accessibility actually feeds back on why it's controversial and popular. It's accessibility. And I'm a streamer, right? On Twitch, right? That feeds into accessibility, which goes back to Duolingo, making it controversial and divisive and whatnot. And these discussions are why I do it every day. I do this because it is intellectually stimulating to me. Am I going to learn more Japanese from it? We don't know yet. However, after 84 days, I probably learned like 20% more Japanese because of people like you. Because of people like Hideyoshi, Lotus, Indy. Recently, I've met Shady, Ink Wolf. We've discussed some like game theory in Duolingo, right? Resonante agrees. Oh, thank you. I've done drawing in my past stream, Platinum. The videos are called Inktober, or it's listed under Inktober. Every October, I do 30 days of drawing, 31 days of drawing. And also, will I play games again? When will I play games again? Platinum, currently, the only game that I'm going to be doing stream content for is every Monday, my time, every Monday on Eastern Standard Time. And I'm only going to be playing Neverwinter for the time being. Maybe I'll find some time, but that's the slot. So when Neverwinter is complete, I'll probably play other things. But the thing that I'm guaranteed to place at some point this year is at the end of 2024 with Hades 2. So I can't make any guarantees when it'll be. I'll keep you up to date on that. What does the 196 mean? Is that the target goal of days to reach? 196 is the number of days since my first YouTube live stream. And if you want to juxtapose it to something else, today is day 2031 on Twitch. And that's for me to keep records. I like record keeping. Record keeping keeps me grounded on reminding myself how long I have committed to certain things. So 196 is 196 days since my first YouTube live stream. I take a nap and they update the courses. Yeah, it's not that. Hank, you're fine though. At least I haven't started the lessons yet, but as far as I know, they probably increased the pool for every other unit and they split all the units up. So now it's instead of having two distinct topics in each unit, they assigned each topic a unit, and then they added an extra review in the structure for the second half. You probably already noticed this by glancing. Hank, by the way, guys, Hank is the only guy that I know that went into section 3 and then start it over. And then start it over. And I don't even know where you are. Are you in section 4 now? And then this happens, all within the time. I have no plans on streaming Minecraft Platinum. Minecraft requires a very specific type of infrastructure that I cannot support. I'm unable to support something like Minecraft. It'd be very difficult. If I was a bit more on the creative side, like if I was creative focused, maybe Minecraft. Like learning how to use creativity could be helpful in some way. My focus typically is using evaluating things that are meant to be constructive. Minecraft itself is not constructive, it is creative. So you have to do most of the creative work. And for myself, I need a little blend of both. I like to be inspired by things. So I don't mind watching Minecraft, but me streaming Minecraft is different. You can build many things, that's a creative process. Building many things is a creative process. It's almost a purely creative process that will require a lot of time, Platinum. Duolingo exists as a creative product by someone else, and then I use that to build off of commentary and stuff. I review things as opposed to create things a lot of time. And when I do artwork in October, that is also inspired. I spend time doing an art study of someone else's work in order to try to create something that has some of myself in it. So I take the generosity of other people's work and try to create something that goes beyond, like, for myself, like not beyond their work, but something that's personal to me. And Minecraft is a canvas that doesn't necessarily have enough. Did I do more? Did I did more than 1,000 live streams? Yes, I've done way more than 1,000 live streams. I probably have streamed over 1,800 times in my life. It's about 80 to 90% of 2,031 days. So probably around at least 1,500 times. I've been doing this for quite some time. No, you're now placed 2/3 through section 3. You're probably right about the change, as I'm seeing the number of units has doubled. Yeah. And you haven't gone into anything yet. Yeah. It's exactly doubled. And then it's increased by, I'm gonna say like 1%, by 10%, because there's an additional review exercise now for every split unit bank. And that's pretty cool, because for me, I've been complaining. I'm sorry, Duolingo peeps. I know I don't like to complain, because I think the devs have a really tough thing to work around about, like, the psychology and stuff in it. But I've been saying, like, dude, why? Each unit used to have 2 topics, right? Like N1 and N2, but N2 always get, like, N2 is like the second class citizen every time. Like the second half of each unit gets neglected by like 20%. So now they've normalized all of that, which is cool, because now my schedule is not as chaotic. I don't have to, like, go overtime for N2, and then N1 can stay about the same length. Recently, after day 75, my N1 day is shorter and my N2 day is longer. And then day 3 is the review day. It's really short. So what I do then is I talk more in day 3. I talk less and bring less in day 2, because I just hop on and hit the ground running. And day 1, I talk more than day 2, but less than day 3. And today is day 2, right? So the structure has changed now. I think my structure now is I'm going to do the new N1 and then the R1, and then in day 2 I will do the P1, the personalized practice, along with the second review, R2, and then the trophy. If this is too short, as in since it's using the same pool, it's N1 the entire time, and I can get through if my efficiency goes up, right? If my efficiency goes up because I get more bootstrapping in one day, then I will try to do this all in one day, then spend the following day with an extended recall of day 1, and then I'll remove writing in English entirely. So instead of writing in English at all, I'll just write in Japanese for the following before starting the next unit. It might be too long though. Okay, that's kind of the plan now. What is tapping retraining? Oh, tapping retraining. I used to play a game. I still could play a game called OS. It's a rhythm game, and a rhythm game requires tapping. So you have to use your hands to alternate and tap back and forth. So it's a mechanically limiting factor that if you take your hand and you try to tap rapidly back and forth and try to maintain certain momentum, speed, beats, bouncing, your hand will lose stamina. So you need to train that in order to reach a certain level of performance in rhythm games. Why didn't I jump over the levels? It would be faster. You can't. That would defeat the purpose of the learning process. And also, jumping over levels mean that I'm not experiencing what the developers made. So it kind of defeat my objective, which is to observe as much as I can. You can make assumptions if you want, which a lot of people do make assumptions. That's because they are driven by expectations. So like when someone tells me Duolingo sucks, and I ask them, what did you do? Like, well, I tried it for 30 minutes and then I dropped it. I'm not that kind of person. So, or something like, oh yeah, I tried out Duolingo. It's like, oh wow, you got to section 4. It's like, no, I jumped to section 4. It's like, oh, okay, well, I guess you and I can't resonate because I went through the whole process while you decided to jump to the end and make a snap comment about the product, right? It's a different perspective. I prefer to enjoy the journey. Jumping ahead is someone who thinks about the end goal, not what happens along the way. It's true, I skipped ahead. I'm going back anyway because I missed some vocab and kanji. Yeah, and I'm not saying you can't be happy. Like, so before anything else, it's the happiness of the person. That person themselves have to be aware of what makes them happy. There's a difference between someone being angry at me because they didn't do the same thing I did, versus they are happy that they succeeded and they're okay with the way I approach things. And then they want to advise me. Not be like upset that I'm doing something, but being willing to add more to the experience. And to me, I've been really truly lucky in the last 84 days. I think there are people who are inherently encouraging, as in it seems like they genuinely like the same end goal. It's not deterring someone because they didn't do it the way you did it. It's adding your advice on top. So I have begun to do a lot of things. All these people who care about me to some extent, right? In varying extents, I acquired those things far more. So know, I mean, as much as I thank people as much as I can, what is a more visible way of demonstrating that I'm taking your advice? By doing them, by talking about them constantly. Like, I'm not going to forget that Indy and I discuss about Aru and Iru. That's how I demonstrate that I genuinely think you guys, those people that I remember, care about being collectively encouraging, not discouraging. So when someone goes out and say, dude, man, you just wasted 80 days of your life. You're never going to get that back. Like, whoa. And then they go around and say, like, I know better things to do. It's like, well, first you have to care about me before you actually know what is better. Like, it's a cognitive dissonance. That's self-righteousness. You are trying to prove yourself right at the expense of another person, not trying to prove yourself right by wanting to help someone. That's a very different feeling. And I've been around the park. I mean, like, okay, cue the YouTube memes and the internet memes. I've been in and out of professional careers long enough to understand when someone only cares about that they are right and they use you as a stepping stone, versus they think they're right and they want to share that with you so that so we can elevate each other. That's totally different. You got, oh, Jacob. Hey Jacob. I got an update today that the Chinese course has changed. My progress was synced, but I don't think I was far enough to notice any changes. I wish they published update notes. Me too, Jacob. What I noticed on Japanese, Jacob, I just covered it here. They separated I don't know if Chinese is the same, but in Japanese, there's 2 topics for each section, and now they're separated, and then they're like normalized to each other. So unit 4, like whatever unit I was on, say like unit 4 becomes 2 units, and they separate the topics. So wherever you are, you actually didn't move anywhere, because you completed all the content still, because they were separating the units, in my opinion, if that's what the Chinese course is like, Jacob. But in English, using the English and the target language Japanese, I basically didn't move anywhere. The only thing that changed was the unit numbers doubled, and then there's an extra review for each unit, or every other unit that wasn't there. So technically it got longer. The courses, the number of lesson sets went up, but the courses, the number of units did not change technically. Like, what I mean is spiritually, the number of units did not change. The lesson sets went up, and the number of sections didn't change either. The number of units doubled, and the lesson sets went up by, I'm going to say 10%. Okay. Thanks for chilling with that, actually. I wasn't expecting to digress today at all, really. And thank you guys. I really appreciate the enthusiasm. I was trying very hard to get through my Total Recall session before anyone said anything about the Duolingo changes. I think this is why I still play live service games. Like, I play Neverwinter because of this. I play PSO2 NGS not because they're popular, right? They're obviously not popular, but these changes, any changes, like even like this, makes me so enthusiastic. Like, I actually had trouble running today because I was thinking of all the things I have to say about this. I was incredibly enthusiastic for this change. Any change to me is refreshing, and I understand for others that can be a little bit frustrating. It could be a little bit confusing. This stuff, especially language learning, I feel is very close to life, like life lessons, and live service games really reflect that type of thing. So when you're very used to something and it gets changed, my world becomes a little bit more colorful. I am not a creature. I tend to be not a creature of habit. So, it's interesting. And what I mean by not a creature of habit, I mean for like things that I can control and voluntarily do, I'm not a creature of habit. Things that sustain me, like eating and running and stuff, yes, I'm still a creature of habit, of course. Yeah, sorry. Wait. What did you say, Inkwolf? I would have been better off. Oh, thanks. I would have been better off staying the course instead of being a bit impatient. Last time they changed the course, they gave me credit for new lessons I never did, and I was so frustrated that my track was so messed up, and it is cumbersome to figure out what I need to go over so I don't miss lessons. You know what's great about that, Inkwolf? In my opinion, because of that consternation you feel, I know it's a bit negative and it's frustrating, but that only demonstrates that you care. And because you care, you're gonna put extra effort. And you probably ended up, in my opinion, if this doesn't happen already, I'm a little bold here, but I imagine all that consternation and frustration even elevated your ability to find what was missing, notice what you already know, and actually, without that circumstance, catapulted you into a more position where you're even more inclined to learn more, right? That's kind of like the weird thing where, oh yeah, I'm a master's, I don't know, master's in business, right? And then suddenly I'm thrown into a company that's in shambles, as opposed to the standard rudimentary way of approaching the business. And then I was like, oh my gosh, this is so frustrating. Like nothing makes sense. And then you go around trying to make sense of it, find all the missing pieces. It's like a puzzle game. You have this puzzle in front of you, and something's just not right about it. And then you complete the puzzle, and then someone's like, bam! They shatter the puzzle, and they reassemble the puzzle in a different way. It's like, well, now this is just frustrating. Like, it's kind of the same puzzle, but now there are other pieces missing that I didn't have to find before. And that's kind of the idea, the mosaic idea of when you get confused and you become frustrated in your like really well constructed, organized system, you'd be surprised how much you learn in the process. And that thing that I described is how I approach most life events, right? If you want a great relationship with your life and be ready and adapting to all the things that life can throw at you, Duolingo having random updates with no way of knowing how they're updated is kind of like that. Like someone just took your puzzle piece and shoved it somewhere else. Oh, or how about this? You have a companion in life and they decided to do some spring cleaning. And they moved everything your chaotic ordered mind has ordered. And your first thought is, yo, man, this is so frustrating. Like, what the heck? Now I can't find anything. But give it a few days. Learn to process. Talk to your companion about why they organized it. And guess what? In my opinion, you learned even more about your companion. And your companion might have inspired you to adopt certain things and integrate a new organization. And overall, you turn that negative experience into inspiration. At least that's how I feel. I played games for so long. Like I played Neverwinter for at least upwards of 7 years habitually. And whenever like a system puts a wrench in it, I do get that twinge of like, so all right, so now we have to do all this stuff. We have to do this. And then it became like 16 hours later. It's like, oh, dude, I'm still reorganizing my stats and stuff. But I spent 16 hours engaged being frustrated. But at the same time, like I learned a lot of new things, right? So that's kind of how I feel about learning. I know Duolingo is more of a gamification, And when you do gamification, it relies on consistency and habit formation. And when something punches you out of your habit, it is incredibly destabilizing at first. It's different from like a textbook or like a formal education because it's no longer gamified. It doesn't provide consistency, a pool of self-motivation like your bottom lines, right? It's not that dopamine pool or anything. So oftentimes it's treated as not a source of comfort, but a source of effort, a source of investment. While Duolingo has become so efficient at gamification, it is a source of energy. So when they put a wrench to your source of energy, it feels worse. It's kind of like drinking your coffee and suddenly one day they decide to change the brand of your coffee that you rely on. At least that's how I'm trying to describe it psychologically when it comes to live service games. Why do live service games get the most, like, all right, this is a rhetoric. I'm not saying this is true or not, but it does kind of make sense to some extent that when a live service model or a long existing product, like say the Final Fantasy series, when they break certain things that are habit forming, like expectations, those are the most emotionally, at first, the most emotionally ambivalent topics. So nowadays, with the hyper reliance on business models revolving around live service, most people psychologically think that games and services have lower in quality, right? That's not quite the full picture. Oftentimes, because of the way the business model works, right, how it's designed to take advantage of specific psychology, your responses are also exaggerated and betrayed. Like the feeling of betrayal is even stronger when there's a product that is focused on habit formation, as opposed to, you know, some product that was supposed to be some profound piece of work that is completely abstract. You know it, you might not retain it, it moves on. It might not even become a part of your life. Occasionally a novel product is so detached, but maybe you resonate with one or two products and you keep them to heart. But for every one of those, there's like hundreds of products you consume and you discard. Memory wise, the predominant source of distribution now is live service. It predicates on psychological dependency, parasocial relationships. So it's tough, right? It's tough. And I totally resonate with that sudden appeal of frustration. However, that's more the younger me. Nowadays, it's like, hot dog, more challenges along the way. Let's go. Same, but I don't think that's this case. Sorry for the terrible run-on sentence. Punctuation is important. Is that why you started over to Hank? Hank was burned out, stepped away. Yes, Hank did mention that when we first talked too. I restarted at the beginning of the year. Yeah. You started RPGs over for that reason too? Oh wow, Ink Wolf. I do that all the time as well. Back in the day, I couldn't finish RPGs because I had to start over every single time. Whenever new things come up, I have to start over. New things come up, I have to start over. In RPGs, I had a compulsion that stopped me from functioning or completing things, so we had to. Here's something really random before I have to jump into my next meeting. Dropout TV announced that they will have stand-up specials on their platform, and Hank Green's stand-up is going to be on it. Oh yeah, I saw a lot of Hank Green's stand-up, like blips of Hank Green. Also, by the way, if you're already into Dropout TV, Game Changer, I love those guys, what they're doing at Game Changer, and they also, I think, is part of the Dropout TV network. The last time I heard Dropout TV was Game Changer, and I would love to see Hank Green's. Thanks for Hank Green's stand-up was when he was diagnosed with cancer, and he did a comedy stand-up tour during his treatment time. So it's very very different. It's quite unique. Here's hoping. I'm trying my best. I see. Oh, hey there, Adam Fighter. Or Heinz Ketchup. Wait, Heinz Ketchup? Oh, what are parasocial relationships and what does the para stand for in that context? A parasocial relationship is when you form an attachment to someone or something or some subject where that subject cannot reciprocate your existence. It can so for example, I will try my best in all of my ability as a single human being to try to make the interaction meaningful, in a sense that I will try my best as a singular human to acknowledge as many things as I can, many people and whatnot. But the problem with the age of technology that we live in now is it's incredibly astronomically incredibly hard to juggle establishing non-parasocial relationships, like predominantly non-parasocial relationships. So the social norm right now is to establish parasocial relationships. You find someone who you resonate with, they keep you company in a parasocial way. Like if I'm learning a language and you feel comfort in learning a language with me in the background, that is a parasocial relationship. That is something that I am not aware that you are studying right now, but somehow having the comfort of someone who is also studying at the time, that is the parasocial relationship that I'm talking about. John and Hank Green talk about this a lot of times. It is so weird in the world we live in now that I could be doing this and I am oblivious to the people who actually see or hear. Like it's not possible for a human being, a singular human being, to comprehend the extent of your consequences and the things you say in a public space online. So naturally you have to become aware of the pros and cons and the compromises you have to make when understanding the context of a parasocial relationship. Are you dependent on something? And how does that make you feel? Because I could end up offending a lot of people, betraying people's like principles or whatnot without even knowing that I did so, right? And so it works both ways. And that's kind of the term. The term is it's a one-way relationship where the other thing at the other end either can't reciprocate knowing that you exist or directly interact with you. And it can be a car, it can be a TV show, it could be a fictional character, it could be an actual person, right? It could be a vlogger. This is the social norm. You have, for every actual companionship, there are at least 10, I would say reasonably, there's at least 2 or 3 parasocial relationships that people use. And raising awareness of what qualifies as healthy parasocial relationships for the person, like raising awareness to let the person discover what they are looking for, what they need in certain situations, what they want to look for, that creates the healthy relationship that I do not think at the moment YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, they're still working on negotiating with people who are concerned with the health of anyone who is a chronic user online, how to negotiate, how to create a healthy awareness and relationship with that. Because we've seen the dark side of things, right? White knighting, witch hunting, cyberbullying, all these things come with unintentional parasocial relationships. Like I don't know today if in the next few moments I'll say something that will make Shady hate me for the rest of my life, right? Like, I don't know that, and it can be very difficult. But the nice thing that being small and less influential, it's still manageable. Like, I can talk to Shady to some extent. But the video comments, for example, the video comments on my YouTube channel, I can only do so much. That person can choose to read the comment or not read the comment. They could be offended and I'd be in trouble. These are parasocial relationships. As in, they don't have to be deep. They could be animosity. It can be, so that's kind of like, Duolingo is a platform, right, that you use. And I can already tell you 90% of my interactions through specific channels, pretty much anyone who makes pretty much all the people who made a video about YouTube, on my YouTube videos, they probably haven't seen the video itself. 90% of them. However, I get to choose if I can turn that parasocial relationship into something more. And I try most of the time. I'm going to say I try most of the time, but it's absolutely inhuman and inconceivable for a singular human to even anticipate or expect to interact with every possible permutation of these. And it's one of those things that I don't think is emphasized enough for both the viewer's health, the spectator's health, like the consumer, the end user, and the content creators. There isn't enough to normalize this yet. It's a paradigm shift that is happening now. It's literally happening now. Like, the United States have government intervention where they're saying, like, what are the channels, what things that can help when, you know, you have a kid, right? They're like, oh yeah, this is my favorite person in the world, and then they say something that they don't like and their whole world comes crumbling down. Like, they were so dependent on that parasocial relationship that it shatters them. So what do they do now? Well, they spent so much time invested in these things, and that's what like the government and Facebook and stuff is currently negotiating. And for me, going back to the objective, this is a digression video for today, by the way, so I'm probably clip this. So thank you for all your inspiration, right? That person, the bottom line of my objective is that I can do certain things like this, Duolingo and stuff, and I can communicate this stuff, right? And I hope that this is the norm in the future, as in all of us has now graduated to doing what we used to do offline. I know for the young people out there, it's very difficult to imagine a time or context in which the vast majority of your human interactions isn't online, right? But I hope whatever balance that was available offline, which was my childhood was offline, can be brought and balance out what's happening online. Right now, online is moving way faster than the potential that you have online. So my main objective now is, I think what I want to do for the foreseeable future is topical, as in it's relevant to the future. I want to see people who like know that we change minds, humans change minds. We are not just like names with no feeling behind them and whatnot, right? And people have to talk to each other in a more meaningful way in order to not get devastated left and right every single day, right? And actually it's fun because John Green, even someone as influential as John Green and Hank Green, sometimes when they talk about their vlogs, they sometimes sit down and they still get awestruck all the time as people who are incredibly influential, have way more professional experience than I do, saying things like, you know, I finally wrote a new book, or I finally started a project, and then they get awestruck by how many people they can't account for that would help them or support them and stuff. It's constantly awestrucking for a single person. It's really difficult to comprehend. So in the current state of the internet, in my opinion, most people don't see it that way, like subconsciously, as in they write a comment and they throw it out there, and it's just thrown out there. I don't have a lot of video comments. However, I usually reply with maybe like 3 or 4 paragraphs. However, the harder I try, at least in my opinion, the harder I would appropriately show something, the more likely that person is gonna come back and say like, dude, don't take it seriously. It's just a comment. I'm like, well, yeah, that is what I'm offering. It's not just a comment. If you become very professional one day and you made your career on the internet, that same comment is going to come back. In my opinion, if one doesn't practice doing something that I'm doing per se, you cannot possibly be practice when you need that skill to interact with someone like me. So when someone says, oh, use a better resource like a textbook, please, and said please first and then please second, that person is incomprehensibly and astronomically unlikely to be able to speak to me in a manner in which we can have a mutual understanding of each other, right? So how can you think that phrasing is substantial? By the way, that person didn't respond to me. I just wrote "Daijoubu desu" yesterday, and that's it. There was no other response. So basically, it was a thrown out comment, self-serving. That's it, right? And I don't want that to be a social norm. Even if I die in like another 50 years, optimistically in another 50 years, I don't want that to be the social norm for the internet in the future. I think people like John and Hank being constantly humbled that they're raising millions of dollars trying to solve the tuberculosis problem in another country that's not even their own, and all that, and they continually to get manic and concerned about all the things they say, but at the same time continue to function and constantly get surprised and awestruck by how much your words can weigh on your credibility. As your credibility goes up, that fear and responsibility also climbs. So if you're someone that says like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna write any comment right now, that is proportionate. I argue from a psychological and logical standpoint, if you think making a comment and don't take it seriously, that is proportional to your credibility and responsibility. So the next time you write a comment and you're like, oh yeah, wait, okay, hold up, I gotta do more research, that kind of thing, it is proportionate to how influential and important you are right now. And I want people to not just do that when they're not famous. I mean, like when they are famous or when they are credibility. I think people who practice that even when they're not famous, not having responsibility, they become superstars, in my opinion. But you have to make yourself feel important. Why make a comment on my video and say it's not serious? I'm gonna take it seriously. Like, do you have such a low to me, all I can see is someone who don't take themselves seriously, as in they don't think their comment is useful. They already tell me like, oh yeah, it's not a serious comment. It's like, well, Why don't you make it serious? Because I don't think it's worth your time, and certainly I'll try to make it worth my time. But if you don't think making a comment is important, you've already gotten used to thinking that a parasocial relationship is all it is, and you make comments because no one's going to take you seriously. And then when I try to take you seriously, you leave and say like, oh yeah, this is not worth my time. You close the door. So even when I make an opportunity to open the door and welcome you into my mind, the social norm nowadays is nothing is serious on the internet. Most people are a number. You are a number. Well, at least in my opinion, the thing I'm selling now is that if you make a comment on my video, I will still give you the time of day. It is your choice to walk through that door. And I hope in the future, instead of having one person keeping millions of people company, I hope it's more like 5 people. Like for every one, there's every 3 people. And then we can build like a more virtually healthier facsimile of something that's offline. As in, for every one of me, I'm not, somehow I can sustainably do a job or something that I only have to interact with 5 or so people, and there's enough interaction where and everyone doesn't have to feel like they're another number, and they either self-deprecate themselves or they project that insignificance onto someone else, right? Right now, though, there's no infrastructure to support that. You can't have one-to-one like jobs. People can sustain jobs and stuff where like there's no one-to-one here. It's that person that has millions of followers, but those followers themselves have to find some way of finding significance and impact, because it's almost comically laughable to think that one person can make the millions of people feel great. They will try though. Like Hank Green and John Green are my favorite people who continue to try to do that, but it's still a parasocial relationship. So for me, I hope the social norm in the future is that if you make a comment, you know that the other person at the end will likely take it seriously, or like as serious as you want it to be, and you're not selling yourself short. I think when someone makes a comment, I would take it seriously all the time because I have the luxury. But imagine if it was hundreds of comments. I'm going to fail. It's obvious I'm going to fail. It's not possible. Like if I spend 6 hours on one comment, because in the beginning there's only a few comments, like 6 hours, I don't have 600 hours in a single day. So that's kind of like the internet paradox right now that I'm working with. And that's kind of the longer version of how I answered this person when they said they found my video inspiring or the series inspiring, but what was my objective? I think it was a broad question. I could have wrote way more, but the core of it is I believe the internet is in the golden age of information exchange. YouTube and Twitch represents some of the pedestals of the golden fast lane of internet information exchange. Like it's so rapid. However, much like Duolingo's problem right now with gamification, there's an emergent problem or an emergent foreseeable problem that is facing international society. And that unforeseeable consequence, one of the unintentional emergent consequences, is fostering a hyper objectified hustle culture where people no longer enjoy doing things. They enjoy seeing things happen or not doing them at all, or so preoccupied with getting it right that they don't end up doing anything at all. The fear of mistakes, the fear of natural acquisition, the fear of refinement, solving problems as you go, all of that was, in my opinion, is a unintended and emergent consequence of having access to an unbelievable amount of information. I actually think, and this is not just me, right? Hank actually had a better, in my opinion, a more elegant way, and then John had his own elegant way of expressing how incredible and also how ill-equipped humans are in digesting, utilizing, and having a healthy relationship with the amount of information we have. It's like part of the foundation of so many social issues right now. In the United States, it's about like identity, you know, like I don't want to touch too many controversial topics right now about like censorship, freedom of speech, like international affairs, like all these things come down to, in my opinion, how much information, like I don't want to sound too generalizing, but one of the major drivers of so much consternation and stuff is that information is so accessible, and we're not even talking just about language learning, right? Think about how you would learn Japanese before having content creators tell you what's the best and worst way, having access to seminars by experts who you probably wouldn't ever encounter if you didn't go to those universities, having other people iterate on other people's expert advice who then do their own spin with their own motivations. Imagine what it was like to learn language that way. I learned Spanish that way. So when someone asks me, oh yeah, you'll probably feel a lot different with Spanish, like, well, I already had a Spanish experience, and I'm going to go on a limb that my Spanish relearning is going to be a very different experience. And I'm going to look forward to comparing and contrasting. When I learned Spanish, the only source and world was dominated by the person in front of me who is trying their best to educate me in Spanish. It wasn't go on YouTube and find and compare and contrast with hundreds and 200s of people's ideal way of learning Spanish. I trusted this person. I observed what this person could and could not do for me. I continued to add and bring, and then that person liked my ideas and we exchanged ideas, right? I created new things in which that person didn't think of doing because they offered an open-ended project. That was how learning was for language learning. I get the whole like thing where if privilege is all available and everyone is always self-motivated and scholar, here are the theories and hypotheses with all of these axioms true. Well, the person, that expert that's making these hypotheses are also 80 years old, right? And I'm almost 40. So lots of the stuff that I'm saying anecdotally is also probably not relevant. So it's kind of one of those things like it's a constant change, right? And somehow all of this has to be navigated by people now. Like, oh yeah, back in the day, you would just pick a textbook, right? Pick up a textbook, say, oh, this is the only resource, so, well, we'll just have to make it work, all right? I can't remember this. Let me try taking some notes. All right, that's not working. Let me try some flashcards and notes. Like, yeah, nah, I gotta ask my teacher about this question. You're making do with less. And that's what I'm doing with Duolingo. Not that you need this to be successful, like this approach to be successful. I want to offer the alternative that I don't care what tool you place in front of me. I came from a generation where if the tool doesn't do the thing, I'll like change it, or I'll do something and build beyond it. I understand that there are lots of other tools, and I still do use those. Like, I look at the tools and people like it. I just watched to Shady, hats off to Shady's and like Shady / Jacob's advice. I really loved the comprehensible Japanese host. She has like such a mellow tone, so I watched a few of her daily activities comprehensive input videos, and I learned a really cute, like, for example, just to demonstrate a really cute phrase. It's tatamu, tatamu, to fold. So she was talking about folding clothing in the evening after doing the laundry. So tatamu is what popped out of there. I didn't know what it was. All the rest of the things she said makes sense, like eating breakfast, getting up, going to the cafe, studying Spanish and Japanese, and then she said Japanese is hard, so she spends a lot of time. All that stuff is relevant. It's relevant. It was very cute. And then I picked up all the words that I didn't know. Easy, right? But I didn't go out of my way to try to make it easy. I went out of my way to participate in something, and if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. Nani? It's called it's a comprehensible Japanese is the channel's name. And Shady, I was talking about vloggers who spoke in Japanese, and like they spoke in a specific level of Japanese in order to make comprehensive input a lot more approachable. And then they usually have a format where, oh, we're going to talk about this thing, let's talk about it. And Shady offered another person, which is this person, and I think her name was Naoki. Yeah, it might be Naoki. She introduced her once by first name. It's either Naoki, I don't think it's Naomi, but Naoki, it has this like really soft spoken thing, and she really articulates, and it was kind of nice. So I got so used to hearing that phrase like kyo wa, kyo wa, kino wa, as in like how like you pause and say, oh well, yesterday was something, right? Yesterday was like, or yesterday, there exists yesterday, and then like whatever happens after. So I got a lot of things that was contextualized, but I already know all the vocabulary. But now it's like arranged in a way that it sounds like there's someone discussing. Like for me right now, when I'm rambling and stuff, there's transitional words, pauses, things that lead to one another, and it was really nice. The words themselves, it's kind of like when you go into a scientific seminar or like a TED talk, and you understand English. However, this person arranged and contextualized the English in a way that is slightly discomforting, but at the same time, you know enough that when you hear it, it produces another level of understanding. Like for example, if you go to another streamer who's using Duolingo, I like to hedge my bets that you probably wouldn't hear what I just said today. Not that you wouldn't hear all the words, because most of you probably understand all the words that I've said, but not in the manner that they are arranged, like the speech pattern, the volume, the pitch accent, the word choice. And that's kind of how I enjoy vlogs, right? The whole comprehensive input is something that obviously is absent on Duolingo. It's not to say that the words and the vocabulary must be contextualized. I think with enough practice for myself, I can take those words, because I'm flexible enough to reposition those words. Like elsewhere and stuff. So to me, I've got my affirmation that I require to know that if I constantly mess around with words in my head, it doesn't get me used to always looking for the same thing or listening for the same thing. That's like starting on your Japanese journey expecting to be fluent. I know how that sounds. That almost sounds blasphemous, because your hustle culture, your favorite influencer that has like the 30-step program to becoming fluent in Japanese, that is what it's selling, right? You watch a video because you're expecting a result. You click on a video, 100 days to becoming fluent in Japanese, because your expectation is Japanese. You're not expecting to look at the advice per se and distill the advice and execute the advice a lot of times. You're looking at what it's going to give you. I don't actually know what Duolingo is going to give me. I have my suspicions, but I won't know until I reach the end of the Duolingo's Japanese course. Or, talk myself into a stupor and then get myself canceled by a very disgruntled person who thinks that Duolingo basically obligated themselves into their lives and ruined their lives. Because that's kind of how I feel a lot of times. The impression I get when people attack me for using Duolingo, and somehow it's Duolingo's fault that they voluntarily decide to habitually use it for over a year. It is a little bit a part of Duolingo's responsibility, much like Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch. And that's also the problem at the moment for catching up. It's tough to know where is the line that you draw that, oh, they didn't really have a choice. Someone already counter-argued me yesterday about, oh no, it's about opportunity costs, as in Duolingo is the default. I'm like, the default for what? Oh, language learning. It's like, but don't you have to voluntarily choose to learn language first? Well, the way that person rebutted was that it's a default, as in you have to use Duolingo. That's why opportunity cost is to deter people from using Duolingo, because somehow they default to Duolingo. Well, they default in making the decision to learn language first, right? Duolingo is defaulting language learning. And then you make that cyclic argument where like, oh, well, Duolingo is better than nothing. Like, yeah, but if you're saying the people think of opportunity costs and Duolingo is better than nothing, and it's a default choice, but it's still a choice that's voluntary, then if they don't make that choice to learn language in the first place, then it doesn't matter if it's Anki being better or Babbel being better. They don't choose to learn language first. So are you arguing that since Duolingo is a default choice, which is downstream of the voluntary choice to learn language, right? Like we're talking about a linear form of logic, right? Learn language. Someone has to make this conscious decision first to learn language. But most people who defend and rebuttal against me very reasonably, I actually can support the other perspective, which I maybe will attempt to here. The conscious decision is they believe the opportunity cost is lost, like the opportunity cost is too high because the default is Duolingo, right? However, these individuals that are concerned with opportunity costs, just to clarify what opportunity cost to me is, I'm not a business major, so I need to clarify this. Opportunity cost is if you use X, what did you give up in Y? Give up in Y. As in, if you choose X, you give up Y. Whatever the alternative is, that's opportunity cost, right? I'm being very generalized because I'm not a business major. So the idea is someone made a conscious decision to learn language, and that defaults to Duolingo. That's the argument. And as opposed to, like, I don't know, Renshu, right? Renshu. So the opportunity cost is, if Renshu has a higher opportunity cost, have a higher opportunity, then the cost of Duolingo is higher. As in, you should deter people to go to Renshu, right? These are also arguably the same people that can concede that Duolingo is better than nothing. Better than nothing. Which, that was yesterday's conversation, which can be applied to Renshu, right? So now, if they are trying to make Renshu the default, then it's a cyclic argument, because now everyone has to make the opportunity cost challenge of using Duolingo instead of Renshu. However, all that time with all the rebuttal, my point that I usually talk about is when someone makes a conscious decision to learn language. Now the question to me is, if you're so concerned with opportunity costs and you're negating both of these, like this, Duolingo attack, I said in my hearts of hearts, I hope Duolingo community isn't like attacking Renshu and then like all your favorites are attacking each other, because the whole point is, if you're attacking this, you're negating the initial decision to learn language in the first place. What is all the content creation happening right now that is sensational? It's about, my method is better than your method. This method is better than this method, which is better than this method. All this information is part of the internet hustle culture. And we're going to tie it back to the beginning so that I can like sum this up in a video title. You have all this information. So is it really because Duolingo or Renshu is increasing this decision? Or is this infighting that's happening going to literally make people not learn language, consciously choose to learn a language in the first place? Because that, to me, is something that, in my opinion, the people who use Duolingo isn't actively doing. In my opinion, right? My cursory opinion. Meanwhile, all the other ones are making it so that, hey, if you want to learn language, you're going to enter this fight. When you think about in getting people to consciously join any form of community, and they're on the outside and they see the place on fire, right? The community on fire, they're not going to even enter the community in the first place. That was my point. Meanwhile, everyone keeps picking at the downstream effectors. At the minimum, I can already tell you that Duolingo being a quote-unquote default choice, like you have to choose Duolingo somehow because a voluntary choice is somehow defaulted, it is still doing more, in my opinion, debatably, more for someone to consciously choose to learn a language versus the people who are infighting. So in the end of the day, I want to reinforce what I try to say the last 2 days. Infighting is the thing that makes me really disappointed. I come from a background of formal education. Learning education is not a civil war. There used to be a place where there wasn't civil war, and and it ties into the whole like microcosm thing. When you have different universities, right? Different schools, like school A and school B, when they're not aware of each other, right? no internet, no nothing. They're not aware of school C either, what they're doing. They kind of try to agree, and the people who agree on their standards are people who have aka experts. So because of this segregation a little bit, it allows the coexistence of A, B, and C, right? It allows the coexistence of Duo, Bushu community, Anki, and stuff. But the internet has removed that. There are no longer these filters or gates or regulation. There's just open information. So now you have someone saying, oh, I love language learning, and I like people to learn language, quote unquote, the right way. Meanwhile, they go off and attack another language learning community. And then a guy's like, I want to be part of it. I want to be part of the language learning community. And meanwhile, there's like, oh yeah, come join our language community. And then they have pitchforks. They have pitchforks. Bombs are going on, like a fire is going off in the background. It's like, oh, well, who are those guys? Oh, don't worry. We're just burning down the Duolingo community. Don't worry about it. Come join us. Like, we're fine. We're fine. This is where happy people go, while they're carpet bombing the Duolingo community to bolster their position. That's it's a very vivid imagery. But if I didn't start with Duolingo, I actually probably feel the same way about the Anki community, the only anime community, the only manga reading community, any community that is carpet bombing each other, even though everyone wants to learn Japanese. Like, all those people agree that learning Japanese is fantastic. So that's goes back to my original objective. Please do all the things that make you happy, right? And also, if you have something winning, offer generosity. As in, I'm gonna echo John Green again. I loved his last blog. John Green's the secret, in my opinion, the secret to quote unquote art, like learning. I know this is a contentious point. Some people think learning is like some empirical objective study. I'm not one of those experts, right? I'm not one of those experts. I'm at most an amateur psychologist, that like a hobby psychologist who has like some training in philosophy, like tertiary philosophy, logical systems, and a whole heck of a lot of formal education experience, right? So this is my being transparent. What I can say is learning is an art form too, because it's so complex. You can try to objectify it as much as you can, but in the end of the day, subjectivity makes it nebulous, because humans are subjective. It's so multifaceted. So much like the secret to art, you offer generosity. In the words of John Green, I said John's Green. John Green is you offer generosity from your experience and expertise. And the magic happens when there's a person or another, or people who find your open generosity engaging and inspiring, and they in turn offer their own generosity. That creates the magic. It's not about whether you are right alone or the people is right alone. It's about when you're both harmoniously right. and that is emergent. You cannot evolve beyond your own capacities without the generosity with other people. And learning is one of them, in my opinion. It still is one of them. I know like from my psychology class, childhood and adult development, there's a lot of like, what would you call it? The natural order hypotheses. I'm aware of the natural order hypotheses, not necessarily for the sake of language acquisition, but the principles behind having a natural order of development and whatnot, right? It's ingrained into psychology, really. In the end, though, it's still kind of an art form, because the things people do together are far more emergently possible and brilliant than choosing one group over another. John Green tends to do this thing where he like quotes someone famous or like some very impressionable author somewhere, and I don't remember what it was, but it went to the like essence of saying like a person's competence being right yourself. Oh, I remember now. Something like a good like writer or a good creator, I don't know, they might be talking about a writer, can make a book terrible or something, but I don't remember. It's something like a very good writer that only trusts themselves to make a product, right? To make a piece of work, can only be so good, it can actually make it worse, right? Versus a writer who is receptive to things around them, like other people and other effects. So multiple people, like a good writer is someone that is able to synthesize information from many sources and collaboratively work, as opposed to projecting their own work, right? And it's going through the essence of a mutual generosity is far greater than a singular thing. And I think language, especially, not to sound too specific, call outly, I think the Japanese learning community is probably much more exaggerated in this, where it's not how I can make Anki work with Duo, right? It's not this phrase, how I can make Anki work with Duo, is how Anki replaces Duo. And then they say it's objective, right? You say it's objective, yet you do know that the argument that you're making that Anki is better means that this is not objective anymore. It's subjective. What are the evidence? Both Anki and Duo exist at the same time. So before you go and support confirmation bias by saying something shouldn't exist, right? That's what you're suggesting. Like, if Anki replaces Duo, then Anki is default better than Duo. That's why Anki replaces Duo. But before you confirmation your bias towards your hypotheses, which is Anki is better than Duo, for example, observe the null hypothesis. Both of these things exist. Duo is more popular than Anki. And actually, people can explain that. A lot of people say like, oh, well, Duo, lots of advertisements and stuff. Like, okay, well, at some point, Duo was not the powerhouse of popularity. That's still confirmation bias. You're building a narrative that supports your hypotheses. and not challenging it. Both of these exist at the same time. So therefore, they are not replacements for each other. If you truly believe that something is a replacement of something else, then the natural logic that you would observe is that one will suffer at the other one's success. Does Duo make Anki less successful? Does Anki make Duo less successful? Like, from the perspective of the devs, like, if you care about your product, right? And I hope you care about the people behind the product. I met someone recently that was incredibly enthusiastic about Renshu, who apparently might be a single developer. If you care about those people's well-being, as a compassionate person would, offering advice about language learning, you would probably understand that I typically ask questions like, oh, hey, does Renshu... You're saying Renshu is an all-access Anki. Does Renshu and Anki developers know each other? Because they likely would benefit from each other. What helps them helps the other. And then I asked, like, well, Renshu kind of sounds like Bushu. Do the two developers know each other? Because to them, when they care about language learning, in my opinion, instead of constantly having ad hominem arguments against Duolingo, like, oh, this is a corporation, they're greedy, they don't really care about your learning language, right? Making ad hominems like that, I didn't see Duo releasing some scathing things saying, we're better than Anki, here you go. They are stating all the things that makes them good, and that's it. They didn't do, like, the other business tactics, anti-competitive practices, like the people who love these products. They're not. I don't remember seeing like the Anki developer or the Renshu developer come out and say, "Hey, my product is better, and this product is terrible. I am a replacement for this product." At least I don't see any evidence. It would be nice to see that, like, if you can observe it. Is Duo actively saying, don't use these products, we're the best? Or are they saying, we think we're the best, here are the reasons? If you disagree, that's perfectly fine. But that's different from saying we replace Anki, we replace Bushu, we replace Renshu. You might think it implies that, and that's where I can connect with all those people. I can connect with those people because they believe when Duo say they are the best, it means they replace Anki and Renshu. And that's when it gets personal. As in, oh, they're definitely not the best. Like, I use these tools, so they're lying. They're lying to me that they're the best. They're lying to everyone else who thinks Duo is the default, right? That's actually fair. That's a very fair comment. My take on that is, I can feel the betrayal if people think that Duo is advertising they're the best, and it turns out they didn't get the results that they want. That sucks. That actually does suck. I can definitely concede to the emotional level of that. One thing I don't think it's an improvement in it is that you peddle whatever your favorite tool is and you slander the other tool. Language the ultimate product, in my opinion, of that is you get even less language learner. So tell me, so if I ask these people, actually some people say, yes, that's exactly my point. And I full respect to people. I've proposed this challenge to them. So you're telling me that if you don't learn language correctly, you might as well not learn language at all. You might as well not learn at all. And actually, I'm going to tell you now, there are a few people who did say that because they have high standards. And I remember those days. I was a kid who had high standards too. Like, dude, why are you majoring in biology if you can't even take biology seriously? Right? You might as well not learn biology at all. Just go like learn math or learn English or something instead of that. That's the type of mentality, right? I was there. I was a kid who had a small world where I can't possibly see people being happy with learning something instead of learning correctly. And it's very disappointing. As a teacher, I don't care what you learn, how much you learn. If you learn something, it brings joy to my heart. Like this whole rant, I don't care if you learn, I don't care what you learn or what you take from this. Know that if I have your confidence that I can project in some compassion and you can acknowledge, you can see that, then that's heartwarming already. If you learn something that's also really great, like about yourself, like that's fine. I'm not here to prescribe this stuff, but it sucks now that the internet, we're gonna go back to the very first thing. It sucks now that the internet tells you, in general, at least you have convinced yourself. A lot of these individuals, in my opinion, have convinced themselves what is worth it. What is worth it? What was it like to be a weeb, for example? Oh, you like DBZ? Hey, let's talk about DBZ. Well, what happened after the post-internet thing? Oh, DBZ, that's garbage, man. You might as well not even watch anime. Like, that's freaking garbage. Like, you consider yourself someone who knows about anime when you only watch that type of garbage? That's what the internet did, in my opinion. That's what the hustle culture of the internet did. Somehow, no matter what, you're going to have someone that one-ups you. So if you're doing well on something, someone who's doing better is going to come up and knock you down a peg. It's not an exercise in humility for that person who is oppressive, but it is a bit of exercise of humility to someone like me. I like getting, I mean, like, I hope no one takes this out of context, but I like humility checks. I like when someone is going to come to me after this digression, once I post this digression, they're going to say like, well, here are all the following counter arguments, right? I'm like, thank you for that advice. I will grow from that. The question is, are you going to grow from that for being oppressive? Like, did you take anything from me? It's called, you know, I offered this generosity and you're offering generosity to me, right? Are we exchanging understanding of each other? Most of the time it's someone coming to me and saying, yeah, darn straight, I'm right. Go off and then pat themselves on the back and they've learned nothing. Meanwhile, I'm graciously, in my opinion, I actually like taking that advice because in the future, I will be able to form a stronger counter argument to that existing counter argument. If I still don't agree with that counter argument, knowing that counter argument is very, very informative to how I can form a stronger defense on it. What did I just describe? Hats off. That's what a PhD is. In my opinion, one of the strongest aspects of having to do a thesis on things you discover is pretty much everything outside of your immediate colleagues are against you. The peer review process is relentless. But now, the peer review process used to be unique to the science community. in my opinion, to the scientific community. Now we have the internet. So everything you do on the internet is subjected to peer review. And in this case, the peer review are not competent. Like, a lot of people that are peer reviewing you are not competent. They're projecting emotional disagreements. So while the science predating the internet had to use pre-review, peer review, pre-selected by experts, right? Like, you have to be among that to do critiques online. All of that is gone. Everyone and anyone can be a self-proclaimed expert. So that's what I fear all the time. If there's any insecurities I have, I've already admitted this to that guy using ChatGPT. I can't beat ChatGPT, man. It's really, really powerful and strong. It will always have more information than I do as a human being. So it was an incredibly humbling experience. And it's kind of humorous because the person that posted it doesn't want to take credit for it, when they're the one that did it. They made the decision to use ChatGPT. Instead, they said it wasn't serious. They tried to remove themselves associated with it. And I actually thought it was a really, really wonderful exercise. So instead of pretending to care, even pretending to care, they didn't care in the first place. Going back to the whole, like, selling yourself short, right? I hope that person goes on to do something brilliant and not just take anything not seriously, right? That was like a double negative. Right. So I want to end on like a positive note. What is the positive note here? I feel that in the future, this internet culture that we have now will become normalized by many different forces, many subjective forces of subjective human forces, right? As in, like, when something reach a critical mass, which I do feel like we're coming to a critical mass at this point, that the pushback and the refinements of the human condition will make the future of language learning, will make it relevant to this. The future of language learning so different from the way it is now. And what I mean by that is all the comments I have now may be completely different in the future, and we might have more emergent issues or not. But I actually think that the dialogue I'm having with myself, specifically the dialogue with myself and everyone else, all the people who hate me for using Duolingo, all the people who say I only defend me, all this interaction is necessary. So meanwhile, yes, I'm trying to put out the fire, or I'm attempting to put out the fire, but it's part of the process, right? Fire, conflicts, I'll put war in, like intellectual war. Those are the challenges that allow humans to reach a critical mass in which they reach a new human condition regarding things like language learning. So I'm very optimistic that at least a dialogue is being had. It's not going to make feelings, it's not going to save people's feelings, it's not going to make you any happier. Like, for me, I say I'm disappointed, but I expect those things. Lots of people's feelings are going to be hurt. Some people are going to be sacrificed. Like, most people think that whenever you use Duolingo, you're making a sacrifice for language learning. That's how crusades and religion, right, come about. Or I'm defending Duolingo, so I could be the part of the occult, right? So that kind of thing. These challenges will be able to create reform. So hopefully the future looks different. At least there's dialogue of conflict. It's so different from like Apple, And like, it's so different from like monopolies. So at least we're not in the position where anti-competitive practices remove any form of conflicting dialogue, right? Even in the case of Apple, there are challenges to autonomy, right? So I actually still continue to support people's counter arguments or against Duolingo, because that's the only way I will continue to learn from Duolingo. Ironically, everything that people point out that Duolingo doesn't do, it's more information for me to do it while using Duolingo, right? I make it work. So the future might be still bright. I think having dialogues and continuing to having dialogues should be the thing. Unfortunately, for my video comment experiences, the other person walks away and doesn't stay to have these dialogues. So that person's growth is only dependent on whoever comes after me. In my case, I'll wait for that person to return with new like counter arguments or new suggestions and stuff. Rooks don't jump over things. Have you been talking to the knight again? What the? Okay, new language resources have been discovered. Okay, and it's looking pretty good right now. Close master, basically Anki, but it explains grammar when you ask it to, and it has realistic AI voices. Also, it's gamey kind of, but not too much. Interesting. How accessible is it? Hank says something. Yes, we now have the sum total of mankind's knowledge at our fingertips, as opposed to finding limited resources in a library. Back in my day, yeah. Hank, you're my senior, right? That is felt really hard, because even when I was of an age to have access to use a library, it was already moving beyond the library. We forgot that too often and don't think about how much easier it is to reach your potential and learn new things. It's so much so that it's like... Sorry, I've talked way beyond. That was like... I think that was like 40 minutes ago. My bad, guys. And then welcome back, JD. Alright, cool. You get 30 free sentences per day to do, or you can pay a subscription or buy a lifetime to get full access. Okay. Also, it has reading sections and listening sections with real audio. Nice. That sounds excellent. It is a freemium service, and I probably expect it to be some sort of proprietary, so I probably can't show it on stream and stuff, but I'll keep that in mind. I'll be right back. Quick bathroom break, and we're gonna finally do our lesson. I'll be right back.